This meeting is being recorded.
No, are we muted?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Intel REI Education Club. Today is Friday, June 17th, 2022. And today our guest speaker is Jay Heinrich. And I only know Jay because he is a prolific writer on the Bigger Pockets forum. And if there's a thread out there, Jay has probably commented on it. And he, in our phone interview together before we brought him into the session here, he admittedly told me that he was a bit of an addict doing it. But he is also a local developer here in the Portland area. He's out of Lake Oswego, for those who know where that is. And he's been involved in real estate for, Jay, most your entire career, as far as I know. Why don't I hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, Danny, for having me here. Yes, I grew up in a real estate family, and I got my real estate license at 18, and luckily I made a sale within the first 90 days or so. Otherwise, you kind of wash out at real estate and never look back. So it's been a long career, a lot of ups and downs, you know, good times, bad times, lived through some pretty severe economic crises, you know, the interest rate of the 80s and the crash of 2007 and so on and so forth. So it's just given me a wide breadth of different things that I've done, because in the business, things, you know, normally don't stay the same forever. So, you know, I've done everything from lending to what brought me to Oregon was the timber business. I was buying timberland, logging it, and selling properties off. And then I started buying subdivision ground in the middle 90s here in the Portland area. So I've developed about, well, probably close to 600-700 lots in multiple different communities. The last ones were 2 out in Gresham of 35 houses each or 30 houses each. And my current project is 90 homes in Canby, Oregon, which is a pretty booming market right now. So, and then I've also built in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm currently building in Florida right now. I've built in Indianapolis, Indiana, so on and so forth. So, and then my lending and investing activities have been all through the Midwest and on Bigger Pockets, what would quote unquote be turnkey real estate, all in this single family residential 1 to 4. I have not done anything in multifamily personally, other than I've made loans on multifamily over the years, and I've brokered a few of them, but I've never personally owned one. So I did do a video presentation that I did for a conference down in Oakland about 4 years ago that I called The Pivot, because about 4 years ago, I was thinking things were gonna start to change a little bit. And of course I was quite wrong about that. But anyway, there's a lot of great aerials and I can kind of narrate through it. And then we can get into how we've had to maneuver the supply chain issues all across the country, since I'm building on the East Coast and on the West Coast. And kind of what I've seen happen. So if I can try to share the screen and turn this thing on. Share. Okay. So I gotta start it over here, guys. And bear with me, I'm terrible. I'm just not a computer. Okay, so this was again, a presentation that I did for my company, JL Capital Partners. And this is what I would present at REIA clubs throughout the West Coast. I've spoken at many. This particular project right here is at the corner of Evergreen and Jackson School Road. I have an option on 120 acres there that I optioned in 09. And I speak to how I set up these long-term options for land in the path of progress, which some of the, you know, biggest profits are made in the path of progress. So we're still working on that, moving it into the urban growth boundary and whatnot. And so you can see through those maps where that was located. And again, if we get into Q&A, I can tell you how I set these up, but that's 120 acres there. And let's see, I can probably fast forward this a little bit. There's a better picture. Those that work at Intel in Hillsborough probably recognize the property. So that's my little, I don't know if I will personally, I'm 65. I don't know if I'll personally get this, but my grandkids are going to say, Grandpa, you were pretty smart buying that, getting that property when you did. Because this will come into the urban growth boundary and it will get developed and it will be a massive project. So
I think a lot of us might know where it is. This is only about 1.5 miles from my house. I know exactly where it is.
yeah, so that's mine. I've had it tied up since '09, and pretty unique. If anybody's interested, when we're done with the video, I can tell you how I set that up. So let's move along. What do we have here? Okay, here's another Path of Progress property that I bought in Rohnert Park, California. This was the same thing. This, you can see the square here. This is a big Indian casino called the Grattan Casino. This is a Home Depot, and this is Highway 101. Anybody who's familiar with the North Bay of San Francisco. I bought that property in 1995 as an unbuildable, undeveloped piece of property for a long-term land hold. I paid $27,000 for it cash, and I sold it 2 months before the pandemic for just a little bit over $2.2 million. So that was one of my Path of Progress plays that I did in Northern California. And this is Riverside Park in Canby. This is my current project right now. This square right here, this is the Molalla River. And this is the town of Canby right over here. And I'm building 90 single family homes there. So when we're done with the video, I can get into great detail how we've maneuvered the supply chain issues. So here we are. The first picture was before we did the underground. Now I buy everything from the farmer because that's where the most profit is. And then I put all the streets and roads in, and then I'm also build the lots. Some builders only buy shovel-ready lots, but it's hard to find lots now. So I found that that's basically what we had to do, and it's the most profitable. These two houses have since been demoed, and the entire project is basically done now. So that's my Canby project. And this was a project I built out in Gresham. It's already done, called Sampson Acres. Let's see if I can fast forward. Come on. Oh, I'm having a hard time getting the thing to fast forward all of a sudden. Okay, I think I will, since I can't fast forward this, I think we'll just jump off of the video. So stop sharing. Okay, I'm back. So hopefully, pictures mean 1,000 words, but those are basically my current projects and my long-term projects that I have in the can.
All right, so it was kind of interesting. I live, like I said, about 1.5 miles from the first project, and I grew up about 5 miles from your Rohnert Park project, right on the border of Rohnert Park and Santa Rosa.
Too funny. So that was right, right behind the Home Depot right there.
Yep, I know. Yeah, yep. I know where that is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the question is, do you want people to take themselves off mute and ask you questions? I could probably get it started because I think a lot of people are interested, or at least this is the direction I kind of want to take the talk, is right now we're facing supply chain issues. And you mentioned you're operating both on the West Coast and the East Coast. For people that want to ask questions, first put them in the chat, and then when Jay either I can read them to you, or we can have people take themselves off mute. But I want to kick off the conversation by asking, how do you manage the supply chain, and what have you seen in the supply chain that's impacted your business first?
Well, my first statement is going to be, nobody has a crystal ball on this. And I can tell you, as a developer and the builder going through this, you wake up every day wondering what's going to happen next. What bad news are you going to get? So it basically started with the lumber just skyrocketing. And then, then oil went up, so your asphalt went up. Or they couldn't get parts. Appliances, if anybody tried to buy appliances, those were terrible. So what's happened now is garage doors. You will see builders closing houses with no garage doors because you have to order your garage doors 6 months in advance. Windows. So basically what's happened is everything has been delayed. So in the past, when you're building, you would just go to your window supplier, 2-3 weeks before you needed your windows. Now, everything has to be between 3 and 6 months in advance. You got to order it. And if you're doing high end, like I'm building a high end spec in Lake Oswego right now, those appliances, coming from Sub-Zero and those folks, those are between 6 and 9 months out. So that's the major issue, is knowing what components are really backlogged, having good relationships with your suppliers, and then getting ahead of it and being very organized and start ordering it. Now, one thing that we have that it would be very difficult for some people is, we have credit with all these. We don't have to pay for them until we deliver them, but they will order them and they will get them going for us because we're building 90 homes. They're going to sell us, 150 garage doors.
Is there any way for you to predict which parts of the house are not going to be available? Is it that they're all coming from outside the United States or inside the United States? Is there any way that you can get a feel for, hey, this particular item might be late?
The only thing, with the house would be, the appliances, because like actually one of my clients, investor with me, they're out of Singapore and they make the electric motors for GE washers, their company. And so, that, which are then built in Malaysia or Thailand and then, shipped over here. So those kind of components will slow down the whole thing. But when it comes to the lumber and the other stuff that we're using and the windows, all that stuff is manufactured in the United States. The only thing I could see basically that's offshore that really got caught up is, well, one, if you're ordering foreign parts, but was the appliances.
Okay. You've mentioned timber a couple of times here, and I bet there are some people here that might not know what's happened to the timber market over the last 2 years. Can you recap that a little bit and give some people an explanation of that?
Well, my involvement in the timber business was buying land that had standing timber on it, and then I would log it, and I would either subdivide the land or I would get building permits on it and then resell it. I wasn't building then. As for the timber industry, the reason the prices skyrocketed, the futures went up like crazy. Part of it is the tariffs in Canada, but that's always been, the tariffs were in place in the mid 90s when I was actually logging. To me, we have plenty of logs here in Oregon and Washington. That's not a supply of logs. The mills like to use the pandemic and we don't have people, but you go by any of the mills and they're running, their log decks are stuffed. There's plenty of logs, especially with the fire, there's all sorts of extra lumber. So it seems to me there might be a little bit of gouging going on between the lumber brokers and the retailers and the sellers. I don't have a magic wand at it, but that's kind of what I see. Because it isn't, my old partner's still logging, and the delivered log prices did not double. You know, we were delivering logs for $800 1,000, and then maybe went to 900. It didn't go to 2,000 1,000, which would create your 2x4 being double like it did. And the OSB board that got real expensive, that was coming from Canada. Part of the problem was last year, if you remember the flooding rain they got up in British Columbia, that did cause some real issues getting the OSB boards out of British Columbia down here. Because even the rail lines got wiped out down the Fraser River Valley there.
I'm curious, have you seen any difference in the supply chain between the East Coast and the West Coast? Is there any difference there, or are they both backlogged?
No, they both had their challenges. The biggest challenges we had in Florida was we couldn't get any trusses. And what had happened was one of the big developers, D.R. Horton or Lennar, went over to Orlando and bought the largest truss manufacturer, closed it down and moved it to Jacksonville, and left a bunch of the people. So, and I think it was Lennar, because my partner that I build with there said there's D.R. Horton projects sitting where the house, they build them out of wood, right? And then they only use wood trusses for the roof. And he said the houses are all blocked up and no trusses. So it took us 6 months just to get, you know, we had the house ready for trusses and they sat there for 6 months. So what this does is this creates a real drag on your capital if you're, you know, you have bank loans on them or private money loans or whatever. So, you know, for us, we have to look at our cost of capital as, you know, you got to almost add 6 months to a project. So depending on what part of the country you're in, that could be a significant hit to your bottom line.
Okay. If you, we're starting to get questions in the chat. So if you have questions, just feel free to put them in there right now. And I know that Glenn was the first one to put questions in the chat, and I'm assuming he would be okay coming off mute and asking them. Or would you like me to ask them, Glenn?
Oh, I don't care either way.
Go for it.
Let's see. Do you want me to just take one since we can get a round robin here? Or do you want me to run through? I had a few in there. So what do you want, Daniel?
Whatever you want to start with.
Okay, well, we're on supply chain, so let's not change course too much. Let's see. So we've heard for a while now that when COVID hit, that container ships, all, you know, the containers themselves, the ships, the, you know, the docks, everything all got disrupted. And that, you know, lack of continuous movement caused a bunch of supply chain ripples. It seems like that has stabilized now that globally. So A, is that true from your perspective? And if that's true, then what continues to cause these gyrations? Or do you think it really is, you know, just pure gouging?
Well, the lumber isn't coming from offshore, so other than Canada, and they're not shipping it in. It comes in by rail and truck. The you know, like I said, the only other components I can see with that would be the stuff, you know, maybe the motors that run the garage door opener, or I don't know what all parts come from offshore, but it's a small amount when it comes to building a house, unless you're ordering, you know, appliances that are built offshore and that are caught on the boat. That would be the main thing. The window manufacturers are local, but I don't know where they get their parts from. You know, we just assume they're American made. I don't know that for a fact. And same thing with like the, you know, your roofing material. I got to assume it's manufactured in the United States. It's not imported. But if any of those components are stuck in the ship, then yeah, it affects it. So I haven't seen a change in it. We still have to order our windows, our trusses, our garage doors, all that well in advance, 3-6 months in advance.
Are you seeing much gouging, and is that affecting the supply chain?
Well, everybody right now is the supply chain, inflation, supply chain, every sub has, oh, I have to raise my prices. So like the landscaper, we're using the plastic pipe for landscaping. They used to be able to buy that pipe for 20 cents a foot, 1-inch pipe or half-inch pipe. It's now $2 a foot. The wire that our electrician uses, the copper wire, went up 3 and 4 times. It's still a small percentage. It's mainly labor, it's still but your subs are coming to you, well, my materials went up, so then I have to raise my prices. So every sub has raised their prices. Not a lot, but that's why your new construction you got to add 10% to it, because everything's gone up at least 10%.
All right. Henry has a question here. And here, I guess I could just read it off unless, I'm not sure how to do this in a tactful way, but if you want to come off mute and ask it, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, in a couple moments, I'll ask it.
I think you answered the question already in your presentation. My question was just about, do you just build the land and sell it to builders, or do you actually do the building of the homes as well?
With me personally, I've done both. In my earlier days of doing this, starting in the mid-90s here in Oregon, I would just do the first stage. I would buy the land and get it entitled. I wouldn't even build the lots, and then I would flip it. And then I would build the lots and then flip the lots. Every time you do an improvement to it, the value rises. So what's happened here in Oregon, when I first came here, there was no big builders in Oregon. You didn't have any of the nationals here. I can remember walking into a coffee shop, the apartment I rented, because I commuted from I lived in the Napa Valley all through the 90s, and I commuted to Oregon to work. And I walked into my local little coffee shop there, and there was a builder next door. So I just went in to talk to him because of the stuff I'd done in California. He says, yeah, I'm one of the top 20 builders in the area. And I thought, with a California perspective, I thought, oh my God, he must be building 1,000 houses a year. He built 30. I was like, oh. So then he starts to talk about it. I go, well, shoot, I can do that. And so I went out and I started looking for land. And the first project I bought was on Murray Hill. It's called Murray Hill Park, at the top of Murray Hill subdivision, but kind of to the north of it. And I was the first one to sell finished lots for over 100,000 in Beaverton back in the late 90s. Nobody thought I could do it. So I've done it and so that was just a lot sale. We sold all the lots to local builders. So what happened was the builders here, the banks really throttled them. They would only give them 2 or 3 spec loans. So you had, even though you were building 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 homes a year, you had literally hundreds of small builders building 2 and 3 houses. So as the bigger companies came in and the local companies got bigger, the few that really grew, it started to kick out the small mom and pop builder. And the lot developer went away because the margins weren't there, and you needed to be fully vertically integrated from buying the land to building the house to really make a profit on it. So that's why if you try to buy lots in our area here in Oregon, there's hardly nothing on the market. Like if you go on our MLS and put lots for sale in Canby, there'll be, if there's one, that would be a lot. You just can't find land. So to find land, you usually have to go out into the country and buy a small piece of acreage. So as all those guys got pushed out, retired, went somewhere else, the bigger companies that have come in, now you have national builders found Portland about 20 years ago, and more of them come in. Like Richmond America came up from Texas. They're building in Canby. And you have Toll Brothers finally came into the market here, and Lennar and D.R. Horton, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how the progression of building happened here.
All right. And Anita, do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question? Anita asks,
Sure.
go ahead.
I can do that. I had to find a mute button. So I'm just curious as to how do you go about raising your funding to purchase these? Do you do it yourself? Do you get bank loans? Do you have a group of people you go in with? So I'm just curious on the majority of your projects, how you raise your funding.
Yeah, I do kind of like what a small version of the syndication business. I have a small network of investors, mainly, high net worth folks. And so we will pool money in a PPM offering, but there might only be, like in the Canby project, there's only 7 investors. So I don't go out and raise a ton of small investors. We use usually $1 million plus investors.
Okay. And then John's got a number of questions here, and I can read them or I can let you take them off, but he says he's a super newbie and he's asking great questions. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, first meeting here, really enjoyed the presentation, and also an Oregon resident. So I'm kind of familiar with some of those aerials that you showed. But so 3 questions here. You take them in whatever order you care. You mentioned something about a long-term land hold. I'm curious to know what that is exactly and what the property tax implications would be for something like that. And then specifically on the Canby development, it looked like from your aerials that there were some adjacent homes that were more traditional farmhouse. Are there any laws or requirements that you build in a certain style? For example, you wouldn't put like a modern, white box that you might find in the Hollywood Hills on an adjacent property in a neighborhood like that, or alternatively, maybe manufactured homes. Maybe there's some requirements there. Just wanted to know if you could speak to that. And then the last part was, are there requirements to establish HOAs in these new developments? And then an apology for so much questions to you.
No, they're all great questions. Let me start off with, was the first one, what was the first question again?
Yeah, okay, yeah. First question is, like, you talked about the land hold, the long-term
Okay.
land hold, and
So-
what are property tax requirements or implications there?
Okay, so why don't I'll get into how I structured that. I knew that was going to be a long-term hold, just like my Rohnert Park property I knew was going to be 10, 20, 30 years. So with that property, which was a larger deal than the Rohnert Park where we snagged it for 25 grand, the 120 acres in Hillsborough is more like $5 million. And how I structured that was, we gave and I did it in 2009 when nobody was making any kind of moves. I thought we were at the bottom. I know that property, when it comes into the urban growth boundary, is going to be worth 300 to 500,000 an acre. So $5 million, seemed okay to me. And so what we did is we gave them $250,000 down, and we took an option on it. We took a long-term option, and we pay $120,000 a year for the option, but all the money is a credit towards the purchase price. So we have 0 interest. So there's no tax benefits to us, and to the person who owns it, he has no tax until we actually, so he lives off that money, and he pays no tax on it until we exercise our option and actually pay it off. Or if we walked away, he would have a little bit of a problem. He'd have to pay his taxes, because we either have to close, or if we walked away, he would have to pay his taxes as earned income. So that's how we structured that. And so what I did, because it was $120,000 a year, I got 10 young guys younger than me and that had good jobs and had either a 401k or they had Roth IRAs, and they put in 10 grand a year, and they have a percentage ownership in the whole thing. So when the property does come in and it does get developed, their profit on their Roth IRAs will be tax-free. So at the end of 20 years, they might have as much as 200 grand in it, but they're going to have millions of dollars of profit that'll be tax-free. So that's how I set that up. Next question was,
Oh, yeah, sorry. Next question was on Canby. What are there any restrictions on the type of homes that you can build there? Because you're building adjacent to some traditional looking, maybe farm style homes. Just wondered if you had any.
yeah, in the city, no, you create your own, you can build anything you want. The style of home is not dictated, because as the owner developer of farmland, there's never been CC&Rs or an HOA on it. So I create the CC&Rs myself. So, and we leave them kind of vague because we don't want to lock in. Again, you got to have an exit. If something happens and I have to sell these lots, I don't want it so locked down that I couldn't sell them to Lennar or Horton or somebody else and they change style. So no, you have the ability to create whatever style of home you want. Right now we are building modern farmhouse, and that's a hot design right now. We don't have any modern, Portland moderns. We don't have any of that in that particular subdivision. I did those kind of houses. I built 40 houses out in Hood River, and those are all the modern design, like the slant roof and all that out there. But Canby is a farming community. The modern farmhouses has sold really, really well.
Thank you. The last question, and I'm sorry to take up so much time here, is you mentioned about HOAs, and you're probably touching on that. So is that something that you have to do in these new developments now?
You don't have to, unless you have a piece of property that you're going to have to maintain long-term. So with this particular, we had to give parkland to the city, they maintain it, and there's no other parcels that have to be given, so we didn't have to create an HOA. You can create an HOA if you want to, but my experience personally, especially with this kind of property, people don't really like HOAs as a matter of course, because they don't like to be micromanaged. It's not the cost of them. And then you have the HOA membership and all the controversy that goes along. Most of these folks we have CC&Rs that gives them some teeth to go after somebody if they're really violating our CC&Rs. You have legal remedies there. But we don't do the HOA, and we believe we get sales because we don't have it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your patience, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Let's open up the floor to anybody who'd like to speak.
Hey, Jay, I had a couple of questions for you. Let me start with the first one. A few years ago, I met this couple who, I'm one of those people who's always interested in hearing the story, and they shared that the husband was like a USPS or some sort of delivery person, and the wife worked on the city planning commission, and they lived in this multi-million-dollar house, right? And I was sort of interested in how they got there. They shared that she would know what the zoning was going to be, and then he would go out and offer to buy farmland, knowing that it was going to be zoned, it was going to go from farmland to commercial or residential. Is that legal? I mean, is that allowed?
Well, not really, but if it was, but you got to keep in mind zoning and all those things, they go through public hearings. So you have anybody can go to any of the cities, any of the counties, just like we're dealing with the city of Hillsborough and with Metro with our Hillsborough property and long range planning. And this is all public information, and they have hearings. It just depends if you want to go down to a public hearing at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, or 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night, in February, and sit there and listen to them drone through all that stuff. But yeah, you can go into any of these cities, and that's what we do if we're targeting something. I'm going to go in and see if they have a long range planner. I'm going to make an appointment with the long range planner, and I'm going to go, okay, pull out your maps. I want to know what you're working on. Where do you want the city to go? And that's all public record. They have to tell you. They can't not tell you. There's no, behind the scenes. Now, you can take some educated guesses like we did on the Rohnert Park property, because it was behind the Home Depot, but it wasn't in, and it took 20 years to get there. But there was no long range to bring that in. It didn't really start to happen until about 6 or 7 years ago, once the casino went in. I mean, it could have, if it didn't go in, I'd still own that property and still just be a field full of weeds. So some of this stuff is just logic, where's development going to go? Because you also have to look at where are the utilities and how are they going to service it. This is what happened on the east side of, this is where the whole thing with Metro and this supply of lands and everything, and the, then when they brought in the Damascus properties, all those properties out there, but they had no way to, it won politically to people that don't really get into the detail. Oh, we brought 20,000 acres into the urban growth boundary. Well, the fact is 18,000 of them couldn't be serviced because there wasn't a sewer line within, 5 miles of it. And so that stuff is really never developed out. And Oregon does not have the same bonding mechanisms for private development as, say, California does. California, you can bond that stuff by the sale of bonds. They're called Mello-Roos bonds or 1915 Act bonds. And that's where you can raise capital to do these massive offsite improvements to move utilities to create growth. Here, in Oregon, to create growth, you have to, as a private developer, has to move all the utilities at their cost. So that's why you don't see, stuff will just sit there and if, like Damascus, like I said, if it's 2.5 miles from the nearest sewer trunk line, you're just not going to be able to develop that little property out there, even though it's zoned for it. But so yeah, anybody can go if that's what you're interested in. That's a very good way to do it. Path of Progress. Go into your city, go into your planning department. They all have what's called a comprehensive plan, and they're already studying where they want the growth of the city to go. And then just figure out where that is and then contact the landowners. That's how it's done.
The city also has to inform the neighbors when they go for all these kinds of changes, zoning changes. Because I know I went to one of these meetings. They were planning to have a R10, and I was able to actually change it to our R7
Yes.
zoning.
The cities rely heavily on public comment. And if you
Yeah.
don't comment, then they're going to do what they want to do.
Yep,
Yes.
yep. So that was my first experience, and I was, able to change that. You have to go
Good
and
for you.
attend these meetings. Yep.
End of the day, we pay their salaries.
I know it was all new, but I was able to get bigger houses built so that my value of my house would not go down.
Yep.
So
So Jay, what
Jay-
are your thoughts? Oh, sorry. Can I ask, what are your thoughts on like the future of Oregon or California, right, for real estate for the next 3-4 years? Are we looking at a pretty serious downturn here, or are you
Well,
still?
These are threads that go on bigger pockets all over the place. There's no question. I came from the bank on the way over here to get set up for my presentation here. Their interest rates have gone up. We've had very low interest rates for a long time. We all knew they couldn't stay where they were. You have a little bit of the shock factor going on now where they did it. It would have been a lot better for the government to start a couple of years ago, slowly raising rates back up to what a normal market is, which is between, 4.5% to 7% is more historically norm. 2.5%, 3% is not normal. We all know that. I mean, nobody saw it before that, and you're probably not going to see it after that. So you have a little bit of the shock factor going on. As long as there's jobs and there's employment, then your real estate is going to be supported by people that are working and can afford to buy it. Oregon's always had a outflow of Californians moving up here because the properties were cheaper. That's unless you're in prime, you're in Palo Alto or Cupertino or something, that's not necessarily true anymore. You can go to other parts of California, Sacramento area, and it's very much the same price as the Portland area. So as for a big crash in the real estate market, I mean, I'm not personally seeing it because of if we look at, if everybody's thinking we're going to have an 07, 08, 09 meltdown, that was completely done by mismanagement of the mortgage, mortgage rate, mortgage qualifications, and giving everybody mortgages and people that shouldn't have had mortgages, and rampant speculation. And because I knew, guys I knew could get 50 spec loans, and they had and put zero money into it. So they had all this inventory sitting out here, and when inventory slowed down or sales slowed down, they had no ability to. They had way too many spec houses, and after a while, they just can't cash flow them. They can't make payments on them because they got 50 houses sitting there vacant. So for me, like on my Canby project, I won't go more than what I can afford to hold, and if I have to rent, that means I won't go more than 12 houses in a spec, where other builders are going, they'll be out there 100 houses or 50 houses. Those guys could have, that's some risk factor. As for a meltdown in values, I just don't see it because of, we could definitely have things plateau. But if you take most folks that either refinanced or bought in the last 10 years at these very attractive rates, why would they sell their home unless they had to? Now, you will always have people that mismanage their debt and get in trouble. You'll get people that get sick, and you get people that get divorced. Those are the three main things that cause people to be forced into selling. And some of those people may become highly motivated or panic sell or whatever and lower their prices. But you'll have a lot of other people right now that have such favorable rates, and frankly, their mortgage payment is probably less than what fair market rent on their same house would be. So why would they sell into a declining market? So if anything, I think inventory will dry up more. There's going to be less of it. And for sure, there's going to be less new construction, because like my bank back east, the guy just wrote me a letter and said, we're not making any loans over 400,000, any spec loans over 400,000, and anything that's going to sell for more than 550. We're not, if you're doing anything above that, we can't help you. And this is a big regional bank. Now, my stuff I'm doing in Florida are $300,000 houses, and I'm getting $180,000 loans. So I'm fine. So, but in Oregon, and then when I was at my bank, so my rates will go up my next construction loans, because we borrow off of 1 over prime. So prime's now at 4.75. So my loans are going to go from 5% to 5.75. So it's going to cost me more.
Piggybacking off that question, you mentioned inventory is going to continue to restrict. How do you see new construction versus existing construction when in the supply and demand, and what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I think what'll happen is the builders will come back. There'll be less supply, and I think the other thing that you will see is an existing home. If someone was looking to move up or move sideways, or they wanted a different home, and if they're sitting on a 2.5% mortgage, and now they're going to have to go take a 5.5%, they may just suck it up and stay in the house. And you could have a boon in remodel business. They're like, okay, let's just put a new kitchen and a new bathroom in and stay where we're at and stay with our 2.5% mortgage. So you could see that. I did lose one sale in Canby because of that. People just, they wanted the new home, they really wanted it, but they're like, I just can't give up my low mortgage. So we're just gonna gut it out in our existing house. But I follow the Canby market virtually every day. And other than Lennar and a couple of the other builders and us, there's only 31 houses on the market in a city of over 20,000 that you can buy. And out of that 31 houses of the new construction, 20 of them are proposed. They haven't even started. So you're going to sell a couple. So for us, we're wildly successful selling 2 houses a month, 3 houses a month. We're fine. And I got to think that we'll find those buyers. And I've got 5 sold right now that are going to be closing. 3 of them are all cash. And that's the other thing that I saw in the last 4 or 5 years is the amount of people putting large down payments or paying all cash was completely flip-flopped to all the stuff I did prior to 08, where nobody paid cash and everybody put the minimum down. Because I see the HUDs, I see what they do. And so you have a lot stronger buyer that is in the current housing right now. So I just don't see that other than the 3Ds. I don't see some big crash because we're going to have way excessive inventory.
There's a really quick question about what is a spec loan?
It means you don't have a buyer for the house. So you're building on speculation that someone will buy it once it's done.
Okay.
And the reason we do that, like when we started Canby, it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So the bank was really, really cautious. They would only give me 4 spec loans, but if I had pre-sales, I could get as many as I wanted. So we pre-sold, and it got really hot, as we all know, during the pandemic. So we were pre-selling houses. But as a builder developer, and my wife's the broker, pre-selling homes is very, very time consuming. And it's much easier just to build them and then put them on the market and sell them. Because otherwise, if people come into at the very beginning, you're married to them for the 6-7 month build process. And then, well, move this wall over here. Well, what about that light fixture? Can't you go do this? Can't you, I mean, it just becomes logistical and nightmare to, because so now if you go into a lot of the larger builders, they'll just flat tell you, you can't make any changes. Buy it, change all you want, but we're not doing anything. This is the house. You go to Lennar, you can't change anything. So we did get a lot of buyers because we were semi-custom. We were letting them, pick countertops and colors and, cabinet choices and whatnot. But it's a lot of work.
All right. And just to say, we've got 5 minutes left here. Why don't we actually at this point have you, if you want to, give your contact information out so that people could contact you. You don't have to, but if you're interested in doing that, you can do that.
Okay. Well,
you said you had mainly private investors, and so I wasn't sure if you actually wanted your contact information out.
well, no, my daughter works for Intel, so I have one client that's one of my investors works for Intel. So I'm happy to talk to anybody from Intel. My email is my name, JAY at JAYL, and then my last name, Heinrichs, HINRICHS.com. And then of course, my website is jlhpartners.com.
All right. And we'll finish it off with the question about where do you think is a good place to buy land in Oregon in the near future? And do you have any comments about the Texas, Arizona, or New Mexico markets?
Well, Texas, I've tried, and I did not do very good in Texas. And a couple reasons. One, taxes, you really got to know what the property taxes are going to do. They will skyrocket. So if you're buying rentals there, the taxes that you pay the day you buy it are not going to be the taxes a year from now. So, and they can be very, very high. The other issue with Texas is the hailstorms, the windstorms. You know, it's not if you're going to replace a roof, it's when. And the other thing with Texas is the soils, completely unstable in many areas. And if it's older stock there was no building codes, and no, you didn't even have to be licensed. So a lot of that stuff is just not very well built. So that's I just didn't have a good experience in Texas. I'm sure it's going to be great. Austin's been great, but those are the things to look out for if you're going to invest in Texas, let's say in the rental business. Arizona, I don't really know anything about. And as for where Oregon's going, I think because of the artificial supply and demand, supply issue of land, you're just not going to see any kind of major crashes here, because it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot force your way in, whatever, and all of a sudden buy this 100 acres over here and build 500 houses and flood the market with houses. So, you know, the urban growth boundary is, you know, it gives and it takes away. It keeps sprawl, but it also restricts, you know, restricts construction big time. So that's always a fight going on. And by less supply and equal demand means the values stay or rise. I think one thing with inner Portland, though, is pretty much everybody's seeing is the social issues. I would say fully 1/3 of my buyers in Canby have come from Portland, and it's a reverse of 5 years ago. People were tired of the suburbs and wanted to get closer into the city, you know, the walk score and all that stuff. And now we're seeing kind of the opposite. Now, again, my clients are older. These are move-up buyers, but they can't handle what's happened socially in Portland.
All right. And with that, can everybody take themselves off mute and thank Jay for coming in and talking to us?
Jay.
Thank you.
Jay, appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. It's great seeing everybody, or at
Thank
least
you.
seeing you on video here. Thank you very much. Daniel, thank you for letting me limp along here. You can tell this
Thank
is
you.
not
That was great. Experience is always good to listen to.
okay.
So,
Okay, take care, everybody.
have a great long weekend, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Jay.